And we want to be able to be able to query that in other ways, right? So what if you have customer support tasks that you need to figure out what's going on, what's out there, and you need to query the system to be able to do that in a kind of support way, right? So chatbots actually is a good way to do those things, right? So if we take a look at this here, so a Power is called, the service is called Power Virtual Agent. So chatbots, if you are familiar with that, is really in some of those sites, it tells you, hey, you want online support, talk to our chatbot, and we can help you, right? So a chatbot is just really a conversation with someone, and it's automated based on a particular dialogue, right? So in this case, for this platform, this is a artificial intelligence power service. Basically, what it does, it kind of does natural language understanding, right? So when you do stuff like, oh, I have a headache, and the natural language would say, oh, okay, this person seems to be sick. Let me go ahead and say, hey, do you feel? Why are you sick? How can I help you? It will kind of understand those things, right? In our case, following our theme, we want to be able to create a chatbot that enables us to query our SharePoint list. And to simplify the process, we want to be able to query and say, hey, can you show me tasks that are associated to a particular area? I want to see the design tasks, or I want to see um, the front end tasks, right? Or whichever business case you have or use case you may have, right? So the thing is for us is to be able to kind of query the source, understand what's out there, and you can even to extend it, you can actually say, hey, by the way, and I want to be able to close a task, or I want to create a new task, and you create a chatbot to do that, to automate all that as well. Okay, so and the idea of these chatbots is that they can also, they can run on mobile apps. You can deploy to websites, you can deploy to team channels, and you can actually just go ahead and collaborate and use those tools in such a way. Okay, so for our use case, we want to enable a business process where we actually are asking, hey, can you help me find the tasks associated to this area? But of course, that's a simple scenario. You have more complex scenarios where you can have skills integration and voice automation, text to speech scenarios. So basically, it doesn't have to be typing. It could be something like, I need help, or I need to find my tasks. And you can actually speak to it, and with an additional integration for voice to speech, you can transform that voice into text. I mean, voice to text, you can transform that voice into text. You can turn around, use the APIs to send that data to your chatbot, and then you can actually create the interaction. So what you see here on the presentation is just really a simple integration of a chatbot. It's actually showing you a dialogue, and then it's actually showing you the flows of how you can actually do conditions, branching, messaging, and integrations with other services. Okay, so we're gonna take a look at how that's done. I don't expect you guys to actually do kind of hands-on on this, because I know this one is fairly new to a lot of people. But I want you to kind of look at how the workflow is done. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to export this package as well, and I'm going to make it available so you guys have access to it, and it will be the same way. The only thing you will have to change is the integration with SharePoint. So you have to use your tenant and use that to actually for the integration to work and hit your SharePoint site. So let's take a look at that. So going back to PowerApps, to our, let me close this here. Going up to our environment, right? Going back to SharePoint here, what you can do is you can go to the apps, and in this case, what we want to go is to go into the PowerApps. All right. Excuse me. And what you will see here on the left-hand side of the PowerApps, you will see something called chatbots, right? And you will see basically you can actually look at the list and you will see what bots are available there for you. In this case, I already created a product lock bot, right? Because this will take me it would have taken me a little bit longer to build online with you guys. So I pre-built this and I'll go through it. We'll go through it through all the steps and just kind of digest the information here. But essentially what we want to be able to do here is we want to edit this. And what we want to do here is, the way this works is the following. A chatbot is triggered by the concept of an intent or a topic, right? In the Microsoft, in this platform, the topic is used. In a lot of other platforms, the intent word is used, but the idea is the same. It's an intent or a topic to discuss something, right? And what that does, it will actually trigger something. So for example, if you want, let's say you book in a flight, you will say book a flight. That will be an intent. That will be a topic, and that will trigger a workflow or a chatbot conversation where you actually can engage a user, right? So what do you want to do? Where are you going? So for example, the follow-up questions will be, when are you traveling? From where and where are you going? You know, that kind of dialogue. So it's just an easy sort of conversational interaction that can be automated through chatbots, right? And with some variations of the words, right? Because you can say, I want to book a flight, or you want to say, I want a flight, or you want to say, I want to book a ticket to flight. So all those variations of your intents is where the artificial intelligence kicks in, right? Because what it will do, it will say, okay, I have a high probability of what you're saying, regardless of how you're saying it, means that you want to book a flight. And we have a conversation flow for that we can help you book a flight. So that's essentially what it is. For our use case, we want to be able to do a product. So we want to find tasks within our product, right? So we want to do it by area. So I created a topic here called Product Task Finder, right? And if I click on it, it just gives me the phrases that can trigger this, right? So I'm saying something like, show me, try again, next, product lock, product. So I'm just giving some random intents that I want to be able to say. If someone says this intent, I want them to engage on a search of a task within our product log, right? In our product log. So that's really what we want to be able to do. So this just creates an intent, but how do I tell it what to look for? Because we're gonna be looking for on tasks that are on SharePoint, and we probably want to give them options, right? So we want to say, hey, what area do you want to look for? Do you want to look for design? Do you want to look for front end, back end? What are you looking for? So when you come across a case where you need to give users an option, right, like a drill down question to be able for them to understand where you're going with this conversation, you want to create an entity, right? So an entity is really a table that has entries that can enable you to give users options, right? So for example, in the case of area that I have here, we have architecture, design, front-end quality. So it's a small set, right? It's a small set, but imagine if you are in an area where you need to query for cities, or you need to query for zip codes, or you need to query for maybe some kind of medicine, right? Then the list of items of options are huge. So for example, I worked on medical projects where we actually asking users of what medication you're taking. So we match the medication name, and then we need to understand what are the dosages and methods of ingestion, right? So for example, It could be 200 milligrams, 400 milligrams, or it could be injected, or it could be topical. It could be whichever way they do it, right? So that's how all this stuff is work. It's implemented, right? So for our case, we actually created a simple entity to say these are the areas that we can look for, right? So, but what about the data, the information that the tasks themselves, right? They're really not here. They're really stored in SharePoint. How do we tap into that? All right. So let's take a look at our intent, right? Our intent is the beginning of it all. When we go and say product task finder and we look at the intent, we can see the trigger phrases, right? So if somebody says, hey, I want to do product log, then we can look at that. But let's take a look at what happens. But let's go to the canvas to actually see the flow. And believe me, guys, this whole chatbot, I think every one of these areas we would spend a couple of hours, but we're trying to simplify and pack a lot of information for you guys and simplify it. It's a lot to take, but believe me, this is a good intro. Then you guys have ideas on how to follow up and what information to look for. But okay, so this is the canvas. This is the flow. What we're saying here is, hey, I have trigger phrases. So if somebody types something like this, I know that this will be, hey, let's take a look at our product backlog. That's the flow we want to engage. And then we want to say, hey, tell me which area of the product backlog you want to query, right? And then we can say, I want architecture, design, front end, right? And then we're saying, okay, let me go look at that area. And then we do an action here that takes us to a Power Automate workflow and helps us query SharePoint for that information. And then we can actually pick up that response, and we'll take a look at the Power Flow automation as well, Power Automate. And then we can say if the result is empty, then we say no tasks were found. If there is a result, then let's go ahead and display the result and give them additional conditions, right? Like we can ask, hey, which of those tasks do you want to edit, right? And then we ask the user to enter that task, and then they can say, I want this task. And then the idea here is that this can be extended to the ability for them to make modifications through a chatbot, right? So a chatbot has the power to book flights, to buy products, to book appointments, to update tasks, to do all those things, right? But it's just a different way. It moves away from the traditional click on this front end, and it enables you to have a more natural conversational input, right? And not only type it, but you can say it. You can actually speak it. This, of course, is a canvas. It's a wet canvas. It doesn't have any mic integration, so you can't really speak it. But the idea is when you actually do a full integration, you will actually have voice to text integration, especially with the phones that is so easy to enable the mic and automatically can translate what you're saying into text to the chatbot and engage the conversation. So that's really the approach. So let's take a look really quick. So let's run it and this is the area to test it, right? And the area to test it here, we can actually go ahead and say, let me go ahead and do a trigger phrase here. Let me say, find tasks. And then when it's doing find tasks, then it's actually saying, as you can see, it's kind of debugging it, and it's saying, okay, I know what to say. All right, let me look at my product backlog and tell me which areas. And you see, we trigger architecture, design, front end. If you try to do something else, it won't take it. So you can type or click the button, or you can type it. So let's say design. So what it will do now is it will grab the input from the user, and it will say, oh, okay, got it. Let me search for tasks related to design. And it's gonna say, okay, I found the following items: discovery, write the specs, debt process. And by the way, this was pre-built, and this is tapped into another data list, not the data list we just built, but another data list that has the same structure, and I already added some records to it because I needed to wire this before the real-time event, right? So it's easier. So it's really finding all these items in the list. So it's actually saying, okay, notice the ID and the information for each result. So it's giving us a hint, right? Here's where you can actually add feedback to say, hey, my results are showing the task ID and the task name, right, in the title. So what do you want to do with this task? Enter the task ID. Okay, so let me enter the task IDs. Let me say I want to look at that process, right? And I do that, and it's going to flow the conditions, and it's going to say, oh, okay, not so fast. As part of this bootcamp, you need to complete this action. So basically what I'm saying here is, okay, I tricked you into thinking it was going to look at that, but it's not getting any deeper than that. But this is just to show you that now you can actually turn around, create another flow, hit the SharePoint site with that task ID, fetch that record, bring the details of that record, and then you can actually ask the user for more, right? You can actually tell them, so what do you want to do now? You want to edit, you want to close it, you want to book it, you know, depending on the flow of the conversation. Then you can have another entity that gives them tasks, giving actions for them to be able to use against that. So what it's saying here now is, all right, let's follow the conversation and type next to try another area. So we can say next. So it just goes back and it triggers that intent again. And it says, okay, so I know next is a trigger phrase. You know what you want is you want to do a product backlog search. And then you can go and say, let me go ahead and look at architecture. And it's the same flow, right? And it's going to say, okay, I found these architectures and I found just one item, right? And what do you want to do? Enter the task ID. Of course, it's just going to do the same thing. Right, so this gives you this engages this this topic or this intent. This is not the entire flow. We just looked at it from, if you want to call it component-based approach. We just looked at the backlog search component from the entire conversation. The conversation has more nodes. It can have greetings, resets. It can have a bunch of other nodes, and I'll show you now the full experience. We'll show you the full experience, and then we'll look at the flow, right? Because that's a more complex scenario. But so what you do is once you publish this, sorry. Once you publish this, you make it you enable it for people to use it, right? But what you can do is you can actually publish it as an app, integrate it with websites, integrate it with mobile apps, and make it available to users. Of course, remember, all of this requires you to have access, right? You have to have access to the backend, right? So for example, if you publish this with a SharePoint integration, SharePoint is governed by Active Directory. So only users that are within that domain can have access. So if you publish this, all this PowerApps, all these applications need to have this cascading authorization, right? So because you authenticated with PowerApps, those credentials are carried over, and when you hit SharePoint, it knows who you are through federated security, and it will say, hey, we know who you are, so you have access to this, right? If someone else tries to do the same, they may have access to, let's say, PowerApps, but you forgot to give them grant access to SharePoint, then it will say, sorry, you don't have access to SharePoint. I cannot read the data. Or this is where you can actually make it very secure and say, I want certain groups to have access to PowerApps, but read-only access only to SharePoint. So when you load the app, you can only read, but you cannot make changes, right? So think about the possibilities of the security, the security concerns about the apps. The same thing happens here. You can't just put this in a public site and expect the public to use it. If that is the domain that you're dealing with, your backend needs to have a public domain access. and you need to perhaps use a different system, like maybe I don't know, some kind of backend other than SharePoint. So you could use the Cosmos DB, for example. You can use Firebase, any other databases in any other cloud platform that you want to leverage. Okay. But what I wanted to show you is what it will look like if you're using an app or you actually are running this on Microsoft Teams, right? What's going to happen here is you're going to run sort of a web page like this. This is a test web page, and your bot's going to get loaded like that. And then you're going to say, hello, for example. This is the whole full experience, right? You'd actually say, hey, I'm Oski. Welcome to Bootcamp. If you'd like to speak to a human, let me know at any time, right? And this is supposed to be for the escalation process, right? That you can say, hey, the bot cannot help you enough. Let me go ahead and escalate it. And in there, you can actually do another integration that will go hit some phone or call somebody from Microsoft Teams for support, whichever way. So it's so many options to do, right? So many things, ways of doing it. But it says, okay, to see what I can do, say, show me. I'm actually saying using the expression say or type all the time because on the business applications, the solutions that I work with, most of our input is actually spoken. It's actually a voice to speech, right? Speech to text integrations, right? So I'm kind of familiar with some of that. So, but here we can actually say, okay, I want to see, so show me, right? So I want to say, show me. So what it will do is show me is an intent, right? It's an intent that triggers something. And in this case, it says, okay, let me take a look at our product backlog. And it engages now what we were looking at before, right? And it says, okay, which area of the backlogs, right? But maybe you want to say, no, I want to talk to a person, or you want to start over, right? You can actually cut off that flow and say, talk to a person. Right, and of course it's gonna say, okay, to connect with the person now, click on the following, and it says got you, right? It actually says I'm not that sophisticated yet, but I continue to learn and evolve, meaning I haven't done the implementation to talk to a person. It's just really giving you the flow and the idea so you can actually go ahead and know the capabilities, right? But this could tap into another channel where somebody is live and somebody can respond to this person, and so that integration. And if you want to start over, you can send another intent to start over, and it will say, okay, I'll start over. And it just goes back to the dialogue of the greetings intent. So which I forgot to show you, right? So let me just go back to that. I only show you for intents, I only show you the product task, but I forgot to show you some of the system topics. So some of the system topics built in already are like the escalation process, which is talk to a human, and the greetings process, or the goodbye, start over, right? So those are the building blocks where you can actually build the nodes to build this whole conversation. So if you look at greetings, right, it's actually saying, okay, what are the trigger phrases? Good afternoon, good morning, all these things, right? You can say this in so many ways, in so many forms, right? So these are all the trigger phrases that can be used, right? And if you look at the canvas where we actually do the flow, what we're actually doing is basically telling the user, hey, good morning, and doing the greeting, and we're actually giving the user option to say, and tell me to show me to be able to show you what I can do. That stuff, right? So I'm a little bit lagging behind here, I guess. Okay, came back. Okay. So it says, okay, if an intent is triggered here, let me go ahead and do this message. Okay, welcome to the bootcamp. And do you like to speak to a human? To a human, that's the normal message. And then we say, type in show me to see what I can do. Because show me will trigger the product task finder intent, right? It will do that. So it will trigger this whole flow, right? and which we saw already. And if you want to escalate, then we have all these phrases called customer service, go back, or you boring, I want to talk to you. You can add all those intents, all those triggering phrases, and go to the authoring canvas. And in there, you basically can say, hey, to connect to this. And then that's what I'm saying. Hey, I got you. I'm not too sophisticated, but, you know, and I'm giving that. So that's basically how this will work. And if we look at the more complex area, so the intents, the entities, and the conversational flow is really not that complex, right? If you look at it here, it's sort of a branching workflow where you can actually have many conditions and branch accordingly to the response from the user. What makes it very powerful is, first of all, the recognition of the intent, right, to know where you want to go, and then how you can leverage the integrations to other systems. So, for example, if we go to an action here, if you notice, it says that it has an input, and it says to get the value from area, and then it has a flow, and then it has an output to get values to results, right? So what does that mean? Okay, so when we do a message, when we do a question here, we say, okay, tell me what you're looking for, and we capture an input from one of these options, right? So we can see the options coming back here, right? So we pick the options and we store the response in a variable called area, right? So that's a variable there that we store, that we use. Okay, so now we have that. Then we say, okay, got it. Let me show you tasks related to this variable area. That's where it says design, front end, what have you, right? And then we call it. And then in the action, we're saying we're going to pass you as input our variable area because you're expecting an input, and then fire this flow and send me back a result. So let's take a look at how that works. Right. So now we're really moving from Chatbot into a Power Automate flow, right? So this is the Power Automate flow, and we can see all the stuff that has been triggered, right? So we called it a couple of times today, and we're going to edit the flow, right? So the flows can get very simple or they can get very complicated. It really depends on you know, on what you're doing, right? It really depends on what you're going to be doing. So what we're saying here is the first step that we have is that we're saying, hey, I want a virtual agent step. In this virtual agent step, I'm expecting an input called area. Right, so this is what we told the agent, hey, you're gonna get an input, right? You're gonna get an input, expect that. Then what we're gonna do is we're gonna initialize a couple of variables here for the flow. We're gonna say, hey, initialize this area variable for us to consume. Initialize this result variable, where we're going to store our responses, right? That's where we're going to store our responses, right? And then we're going to say, we're going to use that area input that we initialize from the chatbot, and we're going to call a Sharepoint integration to get the items, right? And if you remember, it's the same. We're pointing to this URL, and in this case, I'm using the list name, right? But I could use the other list name because it will just find it here, right? And I could use product log, and it will say, okay, limit this again. We did this limitation here, which is, do we want to limit this to not bring a lot of data, and that's for performance purposes, right? So this is actually going to do a OData RESTful API call to the Sharepoint data list, and it's going to say, hey, I'm going to use this filter query, right? If you're familiar with OData, it's OData. It's a sort of a web API protocol to be able to query APIs, sort of similar to how you would do SQL, where you can actually do filters, order by, you can do top, like you can say, hey, bring me top 10, you know, like it says top count here, just the top 10 records, because we don't want to overwhelm a chatbot with, this is not a report, right? It's an application. We don't want to bring 30,000 records. We want to be able to have filtering criteria that makes sense for this to work and respond properly. So what we're saying is, go to the SharePoint list, right? Hit the test or the product log list. Query the area when the area is equal to this area variable that we got from the chatbot, right? So the chatbot will pass that area as input. And get me only the 10 items using a all items view, because we know the all items view is customized for us to only bring 4 columns, right? It's very optimized. So we eliminate the overhead of bringing the additional columns that we don't need. So what this does, it's going to do an API call, and it's going to apply that filter, and it's going to find anything that has to do with that area. So it's going to apply that filter, and then the result of a SharePoint API call comes in a JSON payload, and the records come into a array of records, right? So if you look at the JSON payload, the structure will be an array, right? So each row will be in an array, in a node within that array, and then we need to iterate through it, right? So we're gonna go and do a for each loop, right, and apply a condition to that. So what we're saying here is we want to get the results, right? And what happens here, the results come in this value list item. So what happens is, if you look at the JSON payload that you can actually see from the developers tools on the browser, you will see the JSON and you will see the structure. You will see all the record sets, and this is mapped to a value. The array is mapped to a value. So we want to look at that array and we want to say, okay, we want to append to that array. We want to append the values from that array into a variable called result. And if you remember, we initialize something called result here because this is what we're sending back to the bot, right? The bot expecting an output back, and that's the result. So the limitation here is that it only can accept right now for this integration is a string. So we're going to concatenate that string. That's why it looks sort of like that. But ideally, we want to be able to do other formats. Remember, this is a chatbot. It's not a front end. We're not expecting to return tables and all kinds of stuff. It's try to be very simple integration, right? Very simple dialogue with the user. But for simplicity here, we're appending. So if you look at the expression that we're using, we're concatenating here, right? We're concatenating the items ID and items title. So that's where you see the results ID and title. We're concatenating for every record that came back, right? And then we're saying, okay, so now let's return our output, and we're saying for result, send back our concatenated string as output. Okay, so when you save it and you publish this, this is what the bot will consume, right? So it says, when you do an action, so you will say something here, add node, and it will say add call in action, right? That call in action will give you the ability to create a flow. So in that flow, when you connect to it, it will ask you, okay, this flow tells me that it requires an input and an output, right? And then that's what we basically do. We pass the input, we get the output in our result variable. We check if our result is simple, as if it's not, and then we do this. And this is what you see when we actually reload. Again, you will see that, right? We say hello. It's connecting right now. We're gonna say hello, right? And it's gonna start over again. welcome to Bootcamp and show me, and right. So we don't have to say show me. I could just say right off the bat, find task. And it will trigger that intent. It will know, and it will say, hey, I know I found an intent, and it will give us all those options. But yeah, but right now my system is running very, very slow. But I hope that with this, I'm able to kind of show you guys that it's still sending. Okay, so let's retry. Very slow. Let me kill this and let me go back to publish here and look at the demo site again. Let me kill this here too. All right, so just be mindful that this is a heavy browser base. So now you can actually say hello. It's going to initialize a whole different session, right? So I kill that browser, a whole new session is getting established. So be mindful of that too. This is the same as when we do web applications, right? When we do web applications, a session, if we have a session-based system, this is the same way. So we have a whole new session. Then we can say find tasks, right? And it's going to say, okay, I found the intent. You want the product log, product backlog. What are you looking for? I want design. Okay, so I'm passing you my input. I'm making the SharePoint API call. I found these items. I'm iterating through them. I'm concatenating this to a variable called result, and I'm showing it to you. And it says, I found these items, this discovery, write the specs, that process, and test cases. And it goes on, and it does that. And the power of this is that you can actually automate a lot of the process with natural language. That is the key here, that you can actually use natural language to sort of support workflows that otherwise will be done through some front end, right? Through some website or some web application. So you can actually have, for example, things like systems like products like Alexa, right? Alexa can actually work the same way. It exactly works the same way. It just has more intents, more entities, and a lot of skills, right? The skills will be one particular, this will be a skill, the skill of doing the product backlog search, right? And of course, Alexa has the input, the speech input, but behind the scenes, it does a lot of these things, okay? All right, it has been tremendous and it has been fun, but we definitely cover a lot of stuff. I hope you had enjoyed a lot of this stuff. This is really some of the stuff that you really want to be looking into. Some of the run books and stuff that we have available, links that we have available. I'll make this presentation available to you guys. I believe this one doesn't have the latest links. Let me go ahead and get the latest links here. I didn't want to load PowerPoint because it does a lot. It's another memory hog. I didn't want to do that. So, but anyways, this has the latest, and I'll publish this to you guys. It has all the different stuff. It has the survey information, all the things that you can do. Okay, so I believe I had it before. Sorry, I think I had an extra slide there, but this is really what we want. You guys want to take a look at this? I'll send this to you guys via email from the event page. You can review this. You can read a lot of the stuff. Look at the project repo on GitHub. Loading the PowerApps, the PowerBI, and the Power Virtual Agents packages. So it will be as easy for you to just go ahead and import it into your environment, and you'll be able to run it. So this is a very good time, guys, to basically use the next 10-15 minutes. I mean, the presentation, really, the event is we reached a conclusion. We just really want to follow up with questions and answers. If you have any questions you have, this is the time to to ask those questions. I know there's a lot of information that was provided to you guys, but the idea was to give you from end to end information about what the platform can do and how to integrate all those different services, right? Because we not only looked at one thing, we looked at multiple things, right? And we had a lot of coverage in a lot of ways. So we basically built web apps, mobile apps, dashboards, chatbots, right? And we heavily integrated this into other applications like Microsoft Teams, right? So this is fully, we did a lot of integrations, a lot of collaborations, a lot of implementation of different areas. And a lot of it was done without having to worry about security concerns or anything of that nature because the platform provides those services, right? Those of you that have done a lot of website projects and products, you know, security is a huge thing, right? It's a very expensive investment on the infrastructure first, and then the development effort to be able to secure the sites, right? Be able to make them very secure. So if you have any questions, guys, this is the time, please. We have the next 10-15 minutes to do that, and we'll complete and end the session. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Happy that you guys enjoy this session. Of course, like I said, a lot of information was provided, but I think as the idea behind this is to give you a lot more information, understand what's out there, and then you guys can dig in and basically get more details, right? Follow me on Twitter, follow me on my blog. I'll be adding a lot of information about this, more details, hands-on details, and I'll be setting up more sessions about not just not just the Microsoft 365 platform, but also presentations about Angular React development, database development, data warehousing, statistical analysis work, you know, a lot of things that basically can be leveraged and integrated to this platform. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you guys spending the time with me. Apologize for any of the network lags. I did notice a few of those hiccups. We'll do the feedback to Microsoft Teams live events. Make sure that maybe they can see and improve the service. But in all, I really appreciate you guys visiting and spending time with me, and continue to learn, continue to pick up some of these concepts. They're improving like crazy every day. So thanks a lot and take care. Have a good weekend, guys. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.